Well, this came out of nowhere. So I got a message from my good friend William a little while back about a game he's been playing, in his words, for 17 hours in 2 days. I've known him for a very long time, and it's rare for him to stick to a game like this, so it piqued my interest. After playing for 25 hours over 5 days, I guess I understand why. Until then was an experience that caught me off guard. I never thought a game about a 15-year-old living in the Philippines would make me reflect on my entire youth, but it did. Hard. The game is short and sweet, but it doesn't pull its punches when it comes to storytelling. On the surface, it may seem to have simple dynamics with its characters and setting, but as you keep playing, the game adds more and more layers to them, making you care for these characters as much as you would for a friend in real life. The graphics and controls are simple but effective for what the game has to offer, adding fun mini-games to break the tension of the deep story in a cool pixely aesthetic. Finally, it is one of the most unique ways of addressing replayability in any game I've ever played. Similar to my other videos, I will address major topics such as graphics, story, and replayability, but if you want a statement summarizing what I'm trying to say to you in this video, please play until then. You may be wondering what Until Then is. The best way to describe it is a visual novel, but you have a lot more actions to do compared to just reading text, mainly through simple mini-games and dialogue choices. You play as Mark Borja. Borja? Okay, here's how it's spelled. And he's a 15-year-old high school student in the Philippines. The game starts off with a very sad monologue of someone talking about their friend who went missing. The writing is devastating, and it sets the tone for the game, or rather, before you play, since the game hasn't started. So you actually start the game in Mark's bedroom with the world's most annoying alarm clock, and the first topic I want to touch on is the graphics. It's very unique, with a pixel art style with the characters and the backdrop. However, at the beginning of my playthrough, I was actually worried that the style may cause some issues, mainly in terms of character detail. I'm not a person that thinks a game needs 4K graphics with realistic visuals to be beautiful. I think this game looks great, especially when you turn up the visual settings. The issue stems from the fact that this is a visual novel style game. In my experience, this genre relies heavily on storytelling to create a more enjoyable game because that's a central selling point of the genre, and dialogue may not be enough for some people. Having character models that go hand in hand with their dialogue is an easy way to make sure the game and world is more immersive, assuming it's done well. A silly example in this case is the Ace Attorney games. Sure, the story isn't the most deep and engaging, but they do a great job to make emotion-filled character sprites to match the dialogue and overall personalities. Most of the time. This is because the art style allows the artist to go more in detail with the models, which obviously pixel art limits. Or at least I thought. The game bypasses this issue by simply making the models larger, which I guess I really didn't think of. There wasn't a single time that I couldn't recognize what the character was feeling, and it made the experience that much better and the moments hit that much harder. The camera angle of the game was also perfect in terms of distance that focuses on the characters while giving enough space to clearly see their pixelated emotions. In fact, to hit this home, numerous times throughout the game when an emotional moment happens, the game zooms in on the character's face to perfectly encapsulate their emotions. So, the graphics are great, but let's be honest, visual novel games ride or die on their storytelling. So let's talk about story. You may think from the impression left from the monologue that it's some dark and twisted tale of heavy loss and dealing with grief. This is actually not the full truth. In fact, this is the main issue I have with the game. This monologue puts you in a certain mindset that you always assume something bad will happen. The thought of tragedy is in the back of your mind throughout the playthrough, even though what's happening on screen couldn't be further from the truth. Countless times playing, I would always think, oh, this is just too perfect, or here comes the twist, when in reality nothing happens. But when a tragic moment finally happens, it's ruined in a way because you were warned about it in the monologue. It wastes the way the game is set up with going through Mark's life that is mostly good or happy emotions, and no real foreshadowing of these events. Also, it's set up in a way where these moments could end up being good or bad, but the monologue foreshadows that it'll likely be bad, ruining the anticipation of how it will unfold. However, this is a small gripe for me because there's a very good reason for this monologue being shown, but I just wish there was some other way to portray it than having it at the beginning to set certain expectations. With that tangent aside, the game is separated into 5 chapters. The setting is Mark in the Philippines, which is shown with the landscape, food, traditions, etc. However, the country has suffered a massive natural disaster called the Ruling. It was a series of earthquakes hitting the country, sparking chain reactions such as tsunamis that devastated the country. Luckily, Mark's town wasn't affected, and you start off waking up like any normal school day alone in your house, since his parents both worked abroad to support him. You realize very early on what type of academic weapon he is, considering that he hasn't done the slides for a group project report due do that day. He has two best friends, Kathy and Riddle, while being very close to his classmates like Ryan and Louise, who are also in his book group. The game's main perspective is Mark living his life. For example, the first few parts are him and Ryan trying to get the slides done before class after Mark lies to Louise, who is the class president, that they're in fact done. This may seem boring to some people, however for me specifically it is very nostalgic, which I'm going to touch on a little more. I'm currently in my last year of college and about to enter the real world with responsibilities about rent, food, and much more. As I've gotten older, my free time has been dwindling with school and now work. This made me reminisce a lot about my elementary and high school years, where I wasn't really the biggest fan, but looking back, you really had no responsibilities and a lot of free time. My field demands a lot of hours, making me lose a lot of time I thought I would have after school. Well, unless I somehow make this my job, which you can help me by hitting that subscribe button. So what I'm trying to say is that this game does a great job of replicating what's like living during the high school time period. From talking at lunch with friends about rumors or high school crushes, talking about quantum mechanics, about theories about life itself. It was a great time. Ironically, it was the perfect time for me to play this game, and you will re-experience your youth in some capacity through Mark. If this doesn't make sense, I'll use another metaphor. Let's say you watched a movie with a major plot twist and you're about to watch it again with a friend who hasn't seen it. You already know what's going to happen. However, you can experience this twist in some capacity through your friend's reaction. They could be as shocked as you were the first time around, and seeing that feeling makes you enjoy the moment since you reflect on the time that you watched it the first time. This is exactly what I felt while playing until then. Many events in the game almost transported me back in time for when I experienced it myself. In fact, the topic of growing up was addressed in the story. Riddle, who is one of Mark's two closest friends, is a photographer slash filmmaker who just hit the jackpot with his pitch getting funding. This made him work a lot more and greatly reduced the amount of time hanging out with Mark and Kathy. And the two would talk about the good old days with the three of them. I was dumbfounded at seeing the characters talk about what you were likely experiencing, and it made me enjoy the game that much more. This slice of life style made the game authentic with its interactions and overall pacing, which was needed. I wouldn't have had this connection to the game as I just talked about if I couldn't fit myself in Mark's shoes. The game is not long, taking roughly 10 to 15 hours to complete, but considering the length of games nowadays, it was a blur in the best way possible. It was relatively relaxing going through Mark's life, interacting with a wide range of characters, each with their own distinct personalities. These interactions can be listening to their conversations and chiming in, doing goofy mini games that replicate real life activities, or just texting, which was oddly my favorite. It's not like it's complicated, you just text people with some choice in what you say, but I surprisingly thoroughly enjoyed the realism it portrayed. I guess since I've grown up with technology and practically needed a phone to communicate, I enjoyed texting your group chats with your best friends, trolling strangers online, or just having deep conversations with people you care about, which again goes back to nostalgia. Also, the game does a great job of highlighting the emotion Mark is feeling at the moment, with his character still evidently present on the screen, reacting in real time with the text, and is constant trying to figure out what you want to say by texting and deleting until you come up with an answer, which we have all done. To push this authenticity even further, the game is very reciprocative of the actions you take to a certain degree. It's not as drastic as per se Red Dead Redemption 2, but it's the little things that the game does that subtly reminds you of this fact. For example, you take the train to school while thinking about how to cram making the slides I mentioned prior for the book report. You scroll through the game's version of social media, seeing various posts of friends, news, and politics. During this time, you can like your groupmate Ryan's post, and when meeting him in person, he then jokingly talks about you doom scrolling and not doing the work, which you can feign ignorance. However, he calls you out saying that you liked his post. This interaction meant nothing in the grand scheme of the game, but this was one of many instances that highlighted the developer's attention to detail. I know it's crazy to say, wow, a game recognizes your character's actions, but when a game relies less on gameplay, you need to go the extra mile to keep the player entertained. However, even though I've said a lot of great things so far, it's still very hard to make an engaging video game that is just someone living their life. It's not that type of game where you know you have an X amount of time to experience it, until then is blindly going through the days. Therefore, there needs to be some sort of structure in terms of the story to lead to something, to help the player understand what they hope the character achieves. Also, it's not a guarantee that the person is in my circumstance when it comes to age and I guess life, so there needs to be some sort of other topics that need to be addressed. As mentioned prior, the game follows Mark and his experiences throughout the 10-ish hours of runtime. The game has so many ups and downs, from Mark dealing with triumph and grief, love and loss, and it fits so well with the seemingly mundane days of living in the Philippines. It is masterfully written and I couldn't stop playing the game. I kept wanting to know what would happen next. I won't lie and say there aren't some cliche elements to the story considering the quote high school setting, but there are enough twists and turns and more importantly mystery to keep you engaged. With the topics that I brought up prior, the game excels with the little things, but there are a couple of topics that bring that structure to bridge the emotional moments sprinkled throughout the game and give it that clear direction. It also plays into one of the game's main strengths of interconnectivity of storytelling, with how everything flows naturally, aligning with the slice of life gameplay. There's much more than what I'm about to talk about, but I want to focus on two topics to keep this video more succinct. The first topic being Mark's hobby of the piano. Right from the beginning, you are introduced to this when he wakes up for school in the first chapter, with him trying to play a song and failing. What's interesting about this is that his personality is the exact opposite for someone who truly wants to master this instrument. Mark has a reputation of being lazy and contemptuous with his stance in school and life. The thing is that he easily has the potential of achieving anything he wants as long as he tries, with his friends constantly reminding him of this. This is very frustrating since you want Mark to succeed due to his situation, which you experience when playing, and he has the support system that would make him succeed. All he needs is just a little nudge to Okay, that was a little more than a nudge. Yes, the nudge came into a form of a character named Nicole, who just transferred to their school. I guess it was fate of them meeting because she was exactly what Mark needed to take this seriously. Due to them running into each other, literally, they are forced to spend time together as punishment, which begins their friendship. She just conveniently happens to play the piano, and she was very good at it. Unfortunately, as you can guess from my past tense in the last statement, she had stopped long ago. Mark really enjoyed spending time with her during the punishment, but with her blowing up at him due to some mild tomfoolery, it made their friendship difficult at the beginning. Thankfully, fate is an amazing thing, and their friendship got a lot better, and eventually got to play the piano with each other, and Nicole became Mark's mentor. I really enjoyed the story beat, especially considering the reasons for Mark playing and Nicole stopping, which are just tragic. They both had gone through many hardships in their past, and it's nice for them to both have someone who shares in their pain. Mark mainly played the piano for his mother, who sadly had to quit playing just so she could provide Mark the best life she could. This was a way for Mark to honor his mother's dream and for the first time in his life to be truly serious about something. He put in the work, joining the piano club at school and followed in the footsteps of his friend Riddle of growing up. This was great to witness and see Mark change as a person. The second topic is more unique. In fact, I would say it's the main factor that sets the game apart. While you were playing, there are moments that seem off and you can't really put your finger on it. As you progress forward in the game, the topic becomes apparent when a certain name is brought to Mark's attention. Nicole. Yes, the same character in the previous section that Mark grows very attached to and seems to be important to his life. This moment did happen before they met, but Mark somehow felt deja vu when her name was mentioned. We don't know how Mark felt this, but we do know it was the first instance of this feeling. This is very different from the rest of the game because it gets more intense to say the least. I also use the term deja vu very loosely because the events in the game as you are currently seeing on your screen are very different. It's clear that this deja vu is one side effect of something much worse, with Mark experiencing panic attacks and hallucinations with no real cause. The worst part is that he isn't the only one experiencing it, with other characters such as Nicole and Louise feeling this deja vu. So the story of Mark growing up as a person, deepening friendships, living his life, and on the side he goes to what the fuck. Also, what makes it crazier that even though many characters are affected, only Mark and Louise acknowledge its existence. It's almost like the Matrix in a way, where you know that everyone feels it, but if you bring it up to anyone, they would think you're insane. The stark contrast in investigating the issue adds another layer of intrigue and wanting to keep playing that I didn't think it needed but was much appreciated. As the game progresses, Mark and Louise dig deeper and deeper in trying to find the root of the cause, from saying it was in their head to rain of all things. This feeling, for lack of a better term, keeps getting worse as the game goes on, so it's a race against time and it was very, very well done. I hope these discussions on these topics help paint a bigger picture for the story being a must play, with it being a mix of mystery in both the life and the world around Mark. To finish off my plea of why you should play this game, my final talking point is about replayability, which in my opinion is the toughest task when it comes to making a visual novel game. These games are usually built where once you complete it, there's nothing else to look forward to. Not everyone is crazy like me and has played Ace Attorney many times over, so how does Until Then tackle this? The answer Deja Vu. To explain this, it's better that I show you an example. Once you beat the game, you can press continue and transport back to the beginning, on the way to school for this book report presentation. You go through the same motions and get a text from Louise about her asking if the slides are done. Nothing out of the ordinary here. In fact, you're now given an option this time to say the name of the book to show you how prepared you are. The timeline is looking great. But then Louise corrects you that it's a different book. No worries, because Ryan came in clutch last time, so the slides will be fine. Except you are with Kathy this time, which made the slides less than stellar. So as you see, you had the same events, but there are small differences that you just assume were the same, giving you Deja Vu. When you play the game the second time around, these differences are prevalent in the way the game now unfolds, and it's nothing short of genius. The game successfully subverts your expectations of thinking you will experience the same game twice, and I loved how it was done. There's zero warning of this happening, and you find yourself looking for certain characters or decisions that are not the case anymore. It utilizes your memory of the game's events, and these adjustments have major ramifications on the characters and story beats. For a character example, the most prevalent one was Riddle. In the first playthrough, as I mentioned, he was well on his way of making his movie, causing him to spend less time with Mark and Kathy. However, in the second time around, he has writer's block and couldn't convince investors to fund the movie. This now allows him to hang out with Mark and Kathy more, and now Mark and Kathy don't have the conversation of growing up. The game now introduces new events due to this change, and the overall story progression is much different. You are effectively playing a new game story-wise with how events now transpire, and to hit this home, many of the realizations you encounter in the first playthrough now happen at different points in the second. For example, this is a minor spoiler of when this arc is completed, so watch at your own risk. But throughout the game, Mark is having this flashback of a girl playing a song that his mom introduced to him and played throughout his childhood. But he doesn't know the name nor the entire song due to memory. This gets solved pretty late in the first playthrough, in chapter 4 if I remember correctly. But in the second playthrough, due to the change of one single action that didn't happen in the first, it gets solved in chapter 2. I've never seen a game do something like this. Sure, a game like Until Dawn allows you to choose what happens to get these different events, but I argue that this loss of choice makes Until Then better. You think that the game is over for the first time around, but immediately from the beginning in the second playthrough, it's not the case, and the cycle of wanting to figure out what happens continues. To hit this point further, I'm going to talk about a major spoiler, so please skip if you don't want to be spoiled, okay? 3, 2, 1. You actually don't solve how the deja vu occurs in the first playthrough. It's just written off at the end that it just happens to stop. Also, the deja vu is doubled down in the second playthrough, since Mark constantly references the first playthrough, which you now know about because you played it the first time around, making you involved in this loop. You don't know what's real or fake. In fact, it's entirely possible that everything I've told you so far with the story may not have happened the way for Mark. The game leaves the most pressing question unanswered, while still somehow creating a satisfying ending in the first run. And when you play for the second time, you get shown more questions, making you want to play the game more, and effectively solving the replayability issue with the novel style games to a certain degree. I was already sold on the game the first time around, but this new dynamic brought it to a whole nother level. Obviously, the game does end, but it pushed the replayability to the absolute limits of the genre, effortlessly weaving the story into this limitation to create one of the best stories and games in 2024. Overall, I believe that Until Then is a game that everyone should play at least once. It doesn't need flashy gameplay or groundbreaking graphics to keep your attention, just a simple story. In terms of my next video, I'm gonna be honest, I am gonna be playing something on the opposite side of the spectrum to this game. For those who have played the game, you understand what I'm talking about. It just left me broken. I already have a game in mind, but if you have any suggestions for a game that you would like for me to play or review, please let me know. I am actively looking for another surprise like Until Then. Well, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching until the end, and please play Until Then. That actually kind of rhymed. Okay, until next time, and see ya!